Last week, I started playing Grixis midrange in Australian 7-point Highlander. It's a really fun deck to pilot, leveraging the format's most efficient threats and interaction. After just a week with the deck, I found that while it does have a fairly high skill floor just off sheer card quality, it does take a lot of reps to truly maximize the list's potential. So obviously, after just 4 matches, I decided to make some changes. Price of Progress came out once I realized that without Alpha Jewels, I'm paying quite enough life to my mana base already. I replaced it with Chain Lightning, which can still go to the Dome if I need. For the same reason, I tucked in an extra island, which also improves my Mystic Sanctuary, since an incident last week where I cracked a blue fetch without realizing that all my islands were either in hand or in play. The biggest thing for this deck is to get the reps in. Of all the lists I've played, this is the one my opponents will be the most prepared for. It's been a boogeyman of the format since my debut here. It's crucial that I really understand what my interaction points are and how my opponents will play to mitigate them. With that out of the way, let's get into the games. My round 1 opponent struck fear into my heart with a turn 1 Chromox into War Instigator, but with a Thoughtseize I found that they only had General Crete and Fury left in their hand. Taking the General left them with virtually no pressure, and after sticking a defensive Frog, even though they did take it out with Fury after a couple of turns, the damage was done, and Murktide Regent closed out the game. Game 2, they were able to develop their board very quickly while I got stuck on 2 lands, but Dothy Voidwalker taking their fetch got me to the number that I needed to cast Brotherhood's End, and that was just lights out. The Goblins players I've spoken to don't like the Grixis matchup, which surprised me. When I played Goblins, I found that the ability to apply 2 different types of pressure, beatdown and combo, made it really difficult for the Grixis players to respond. While I agree that each plan individually is weak to Grixis' strengths of cheap threats and cheaper interaction, the ability to do both can force a Grixis player to go shields down at really awkward moments. Moving on to round 2, and I was up against Bug Thoracle. Weirdly, this is the first time I've played against Thoracle, but it's a favoured matchup and I made good use of it. In game 1 I had a great Frog game. I feel like I'm getting way better at using this card. The more I understand each situation, the easier it gets to see what I need to keep and what I can afford to pitch. There was a weird moment in game 2 where on my turn 3 I had this hand and my opponent had a Metamorphosis Fanatic in play. Now, I decided to slam the Goyf rather than wait a turn and hold up interaction alongside it, which my opponent said afterwards is probably correct. It spends more mana and I knew that they couldn't kill it with what they had in their hand. I've heard that these guys played Grixis once or twice. As it happened, they top-decked Drown in the Lock, so I was destined to lose either way. Game 3 was really scary. Despite having great pressure off of a turn 1 Nethergoyf into turn 2 Psychic Frog, I saw their hand with an Inquisition. They had just Grief and Metamorphosis Fanatic. I pass, and on their turn 4, they tank hard. They pitch cast Grief, and then cast a Spellseeker. I have no interaction, so they are able to go and get Tainted Pact. Draw for turn, it's days, I crack in, I draw Unholy here. They have to block with the Spellseeker, but on their turn they cast Tainted Pact, and they go for Thassa's Oracle. It is the second last card in their deck. They cast it, and the Unholy Heat comes in clutch, because I can kill the Thoracle, and they have 0 devotion. With 1 card in library, I win. The matchup which followed was Shops. Now, big mana decks are always tough for Grixis, since almost all my interaction is geared towards smaller targets. I managed to take game 2 despite going down to 3 between my mana base and their Palantir, but games 1 and 3 both featured Workshop into One Ring, which is a pretty difficult advantage to overcome. I had a cool line in game 3 where I used Murktide Regent to keep their Portal to Phyrexia unable to reanimate anything and force them to pop their Ugin for -7 to kill it, but sadly, with no pressure left, they were able to Abstergo back the Ugin, and that is lights out. My final opponent was on a really spicy sneak and show brew. Our first game was really slow since I had interaction, no threats, and they had threats, no combo, but I eventually drew into Thoughtseize, and having started the game with a Reanimate, I was able to take their Atali, slam it, hit their Atraxa, and even though they dealt with Atraxa, I hit them for 7, Bolt, Snap Bolt, Chain Lightning, takes them down from 15. Game 2, they sadly had to mulligan into the exact kind of hand that Grixis is great at punishing. Just a cantrip, some counterspells, and only one land. With Ragavan and Hand Attack, I was able to suppress their development and slowly whittle them down to 0. It feels pretty good to get a result like this, but I can't get complacent. I had fairly favourable matchups this week, and at a big tournament I can expect to see a lot more decks like Shops or even more likely Eldrazi, which are prepared to take me down a peg. I like Justin's approach of using Paragoyf and the main deck Price of Progress as aggressive ways to punish these opponents, but I just need a way to make it work a bit better with my shell. The difficulty in punishing the format's big mana decks right now is that the best ways to do it tend to be symmetrical, things like Price of Progress or Blood Moon. This is a teensy-weensy problem for a 3-color mid-range deck which relies on a flexible mana base, especially when I'm paying a lot of life to get it. I can target their artifacts, but they almost always get at least one use out of them, and the first use tends to be the best one. There is another option. I could give up. It seems a bit defeatist, but when targeting a meta, it's usually best to pick a deck with good matchups against the best decks you expect to see, and not worry about the more niche counter matchups. With the finals at Wollongong's Winter Sanctum being Breach against Breach, we might expect to see at the next major tournament more combo or anti-combo decks and less Eldrazi, which could give Grixis a really strong angle of attack. I'll keep practicing with Grixis, but I'm also brewing some content decks, so stick around if you want to see that juice. I'm working on some different content for the channel too, so let me know if there's something that you'd like to see. Until next time, good luck, have fun, and may the best wizard win.